Extend my deep thanks to Pastor Steve and the Church and Society Committee, the United Methodist Women, and Ann Price for the just wonderful invitation to be with you for this Children's Sabbath, and to all of you for the gift and blessing of this opportunity to worship with you this morning as we gather on this Children's Sabbath day all across our nation. Congregations are uniting their hearts and voices to work faithfully for justice and the end of child poverty, and it is just a great gift to be spending this Children's Sabbath with all of you, so thank you for the warm welcome. And now we do turn to our New Testament reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. And again, I'll be reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. Jesus said, "In a certain city, there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city, there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while, the judge refused. But later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to God's chosen ones who cry to God day and night? Will God delay long in helping them? I tell you, God will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
So I spent last week at CDF Haley Farm, the Children's Defense Fund's retreat center in Tennessee, where we hold spiritual retreats and a summer institute for child advocacy ministry and host various gatherings of other social justice groups. So I was down there helping to organize the office building and discovered that after each gathering throughout the year, the resident staff had taken to stashing unclaimed items from the lost and found in a storage room. Piled high in the boxes were 8 pairs of sunglasses, a scarf, several jackets, countless shirts, a pair of neon orange socks, a mildewed lunch bag, a dozen thermoses, books, hats, a half-filled notebook, and one wooden plaque with a life-size plastic Billy the Bass fish attached. The staff was unsure which lost items were valuable, would be missed by the owners, would be sought out and reclaimed. So faced with the magnitude of what was lost, unsure how to start dealing with it, they'd done nothing. They were just too overwhelmed. The writer Anne Lamott tells a story about her brother when he was 10, when he too was overwhelmed. She writes that her brother was trying to get a report on birds written that he'd had 3 months to write, which was due the next day. She recalls, quote, "We were out at our family cabin in Bolinas, and my brother was at the kitchen table close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books on birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder and said, 'Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird.'" And continues, "I tell this story because it usually makes a dent in the tremendous sense of being overwhelmed that my students experience. Sometimes it actually gives them hope. And hope, as Chesterton said, is the power of being cheerful in circumstances that we know are desperate." These are days when children are in desperate circumstances and we can feel overwhelmed. In our nation, more than 12 million children are living in poverty, about 1 in every 5 children. Millions of children are suffering hunger. Gun violence takes a daily deadly toll on children. Children are being torn from parents' arms at the border. Yes, there can be a tremendous sense of overwhelm in these desperate circumstances. Whether one is a child or parent in these dire circumstances or one who wants to help, either way, we can lose heart. Just listen to 10-year-old Alan, who said, quote, "My dad did not have enough money to buy his car license, so the cop took his car away. He can't drive anymore. Now it's harder for him to get to work, and sometimes he's late, so he does not get as much money as he used to get. Now we have to go walking everywhere. We get tired. Our life is harder. We can't get as much food. It's hard for me to go to sleep, and I'm tired in the morning. When I grow up, I was thinking to be a doctor, but now I think I won't be able to do anything because I won't even have food or shelter." Alan is losing heart, and no wonder. Spirit-crushing, dream-demolishing, hunger-inducing poverty afflicts millions of children whose one childhood is slipping by, as our nation fails to invest in policies that would increase employment, make work pay, and reduce poverty's effects like hunger and homelessness on children like Alan. Impoverished children and families have good reason to lose heart at our nation's failure to do what it can to reduce child poverty. Those of us who stand with and for impoverished children also risk losing heart. Injustice seems so enduring, doesn't it? Power and privilege seem so secure in the hands of the few. Compassion seems at an all-time low, doesn't it? No wonder so many of us are tempted to turn to distraction and distancing to dull the pain of despair and discouragement. I wonder, have you ever felt that way? The late Dr. Fred Craddock was a biblical scholar, renowned preacher, professor, and author. He also had a heart for children and justice and was especially devoted to serving the children of Appalachia, many of whom live in houses without floors or plumbing or electricity or running water. So Dr. Craddock and his team helped with a food pantry that distributed 100,000 pounds of food a year and worked with children in the Head Start program, providing more than 800 children across 3 states with new books and extra staff to provide music and storytelling and dance. Dr. Craddock told us, quote, "We go into the homes and we talk to the mothers about the importance of reading to the children because by the end of the year they'll have been given lots of books and we're just having a great time, except when we get word from Washington that they're wondering about the value of Head Start, you know. Great day in the morning," he said. "I talked to the senator from our area about Head Start, and he just said, 'I'm not on that committee.'" Sounds a little bit like the judge in today's parable. The judge in Jesus' parable was in a position endowed with responsibility for assuring justice, especially for those most vulnerable and dependent on those in authority, to ensure the power didn't tip in favor of the powerful. But this judge didn't respect God or people, evident in his dismissive actions and disregard for justice. In Jesus' day, widows were those most likely to be impoverished as they struggled to provide for themselves and their children. They had the least standing and power in institutional structures and community regard. They were those to whom God urged the religious community to give the most priority: protection, justice, and compassion. Millions of parents today know that feeling of being on the outside of power structures, and the frustration when they're seeking basics like food and housing and heat and health care that their family needs to survive, when the systems and providers and bureaucracy seem, like the parable's judge, to be no respecter of persons. We know what it feels like to see Congress pass legislation that grants enormous tax breaks to the wealthy, while families who struggle to make ends meet see nutrition and health and other necessities threatened, cuts, and repealed. Notice, though, that despite their traditional expectation that the widow would be the object of others' protection, in this parable, the widow is advocating on her own behalf. Today, we find power and inspiration in the persistence of those who, like the parable's widow, are advocating for justice, especially those who know injustice and impoverishment firsthand. How can we hear and heed and support those demands for justice? Our parable's widow reminds me of Julia Dinsmore. Julia grew up as a child in an impoverished family. Later, as an adult, she and her children were in poverty. Julia wrote the following poem about her experience. My name is not those people. I'm a loving woman, a mother in pain, giving birth to the future where my babies have the same chance to thrive as anyone. My name is not inadequate. I did not make my husband leave us. He chose to and chooses not to pay child support. Truth is, though, there isn't a job base for all fathers to support their families. While society turns its head, my children pay the price. My name is not problem and case to be managed. I'm a capable human being and citizen, not just a client. The social service system can never replace the compassion and concern of loving grandparents, aunts, uncles, fathers, cousins, community, all the bonded people who need to be but are not present to bring children forward to their potential. My name is not ignorant, dumb, or uneducated. I got my PhD from the University of Life, the School of Hard Everything. I live with an income of $621 with $169 in food stamps for 3 kids. Rent is $585. That leaves $36 a month to live on. I am such a genius at surviving, I could balance the state budget in an hour. Never mind that there's a lack of living wage jobs. Never mind that it's impossible to be the sole emotional, social, spiritual, and economic support to a family. Never mind that parents are losing their children to gangs, drugs, stealing, prostitution, the poverty industry, social workers, kidnapping, the streets, the predators. Forget about putting money into schools, just build more prisons. My name is not lay down and die quietly. My love is powerful, and the urge to keep my children alive will never stop. All children need homes and people who love them. All children need safety and the chance to be the people they were born to be. The wind will stop before I allow my sons to become a statistic. Before you give in to the urge to blame me, the blame that lets us go blind and unknowing into the isolation that disconnects your humanity from mine, take another look. Don't go away. For I am not the problem but the solution, and my name is not those people. Julia's words are from her book, My Name is Child of God, not those people. A first-person look at poverty. Despite the unjust, dehumanizing, dismissive, disrespectful authorities and others that Julia has encountered, she, like the widow, stood in her own strength and affirmed the truth that she and her children are children of God who deserve justice. About 10 years ago, Dr. Craddock, whom I mentioned before, was speaking at our Proctor Institute for Child Advocacy Ministry, and he shared this experience. Dr. Craddock said, I was in a bad mood one night when I was saying my prayers. I said to God, I think you have too many children, God. God said, what did you say, Fred? Craddock responded, I just think you have too many children, God. I read the report. Millions go to bed hungry every night, and what is it, a child in the U.S. shot dead every 3 hours? God, if you can't feed and clothe and keep safe the children you have, well then you just have too many. God didn't say anything right away, Dr. Craddock told us. Then God said, well, you came from a pretty big family, Fred. How did you all do it? Well, I said there was never any question. The older took care of the younger. Those who were able took care of those who weren't able. God said, that's right. You got it. That's the plan. That's the plan. The parable assures Jesus' followers that God will quickly grant justice. Quickly here doesn't refer to clock time, chronos, but kairos, God's time. That is, we don't have to convince God to grant justice, because God has always been and always will be on the side of justice. Our reading in Luke today, it began with a parable offered for those at risk of losing something, losing heart. And it ends with the question of what will be found. Where will God find faith on earth? So in that pile of mostly meaningless lost items at the Children's Defense Haley Farm, I mentioned at the beginning that there was a half-filled notebook. Well, as I sorted those items for garbage or goodwill, I opened the notebook to see if I could determine an owner, to return it to. Well, the pages were filled with the writer's reflections on the transformation she was experiencing at our Proctor Institute for Child Advocacy Ministry. How her faith was deepening, her sense of calling to justice strengthening, her determination to make a difference being confirmed and equipped. She described losing a sense of despair and finding a new level of commitment. What does it look like for us as God's people to live out our faith? Where is our faith to be found? There are the prayers of our hearts and voices, to be sure, and also the prayers of our hands and our feet in action for justice. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once said about participating in a civil rights march with Dr. Martin Luther King, "I felt as though my feet were praying." Will our faith be found as we are organized and advocate for justice? Surely faith is found as you distribute clothing and other items at the Church Mouse thrift shop or stock the Sparta Ecumenical Food Pantry. I believe faith is found as you support Rainbows for All God's Children. And your faith is evident as you share a meal and love through Feed the Body, Feed the Soul, and in Family Promise as you extend hospitality and housing and hope. I believe God finds your faith expressed in Mad Missions as mothers and daughters are taking action together. There are important opportunities for faith in the God of justice to be found as you connect the stories and lives and faces of those you serve, meeting immediate needs with calls for systemic change. Our faith can be found if we join with those who know injustice firsthand, and together press for policy change that would not only ease the harms of homelessness and the pain of poverty and the hurt of hunger, but prevent them. Will faith be found as you write to your elected leaders to support 9 policy improvements that could cut child poverty by more than half? Will faith be found as you gather a group to meet with your legislators to urge them to advance policies to lift children out of poverty? Where will your faith be found? Jesus knew that his followers were tempted to lose heart. Luke was writing to followers who were discouraged and despairing after decades of persecution and hard times. We too know how easy it is to lose heart when our hearts are aching and breaking for children who suffer injustice. But we can take heart in Jesus' reminder that God has always been and ever will be on the side of justice. And to paraphrase Anne Lamott's father, friends, we just need to take it child by child, action by action, until we get the job done. May it be so. Amen.